Good morning, everyone. Welcome back once more to today's Aurum podcast, where we discuss all matters that relate to HR and risk advisory. I'm your host, Anthony Kuria, and with me is Zipporah Kuria. Zippy, say hi.
Good morning all.
Yes, and then we have Linda Atieno, our guest.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, ladies. Yes, today we are glad to be live discussing matters that we began last week. Remember, last week we said that the month of March 2021, we are discussing all matters in regards to compliance in the workplace. And today is our second installment on this matter. We are, as I said, this is the Aurum podcast, which is brought to you by Aurum Consultants Limited. And we handle issues regarding to HR and risk advisory. Now, last week, Zippy, we had a good time, just me and you, beginning this topic of compliance. And we discussed a number of things, and you brought into fore a number of issues that we were wondering, okay, it looks like it's a heavy subject, it's a heavy topic. And so the question that comes, somebody probably asked me, is compliance really necessary in the workplace? Let's start from that before we go to our main body of what we wanted to discuss today. Let me just ask you, somebody asked me out there, what is this compliance business? Is it really necessary in the workplace?
Thank you, Anthony. And just to pick up from last week, what we talked about, compliance is a necessity really at the workplace, and I think it's necessary not just because the law requires us to be compliant, but also to make sure it's an environment where employees are happy to be in. You have to remember that we spend most of our hours at the workplace. So if we are spending most of our hours at the workplace, then it's important for us to ensure it's an environment that is conducive. It's an environment we want to be in. It's an environment that, is not prone to health challenges or hazards. It's an environment that we are secure in. So if you ask me, I would say, yes, I think compliance is important at the workplace. Because it kind of helps us have a framework of what we need to be doing, not just as employers, but even as employees, because compliance does not just touch on employer alone. Employees also have a responsibility to play when it comes to how do they comply with the guidelines that we have already put in place as employers. So I would say it's an important aspect.
All right. Thank you for that, because people sometimes sit and wonder, okay, what is this compliance business? Now, first of all, apologies. Linda, I'm sorry I did not introduce you formally. Forgive me for that. To our listeners and those that are watching us, Linda Atieno is a medical and WIBA officer working with SGR. So, Linda, I would really love to hear your opinion. I have a question for you. I have a topic. I mean, one of the things that I've been wanting to find out from you is, what are some of the employer responsibilities as per the Osha Act of 2007?
Thank you so much for having me. And the main thing I can say for the employer's responsibility is that he should ensure that he has prepared a policy statement, and that everything in that policy statement, that he has made sure all his employees know about all the policy that he has set. And then he should bring the content of the policy to the attention of every employee and make sure that they understand it, so that when an employee is working in the organization, and he should be able to know that these are the set rules and guidelines, this as per the Osha, and also he should make sure that he reports accidents when accidents and injuries occur to the Occupational Safety and Health Committee.
So to our listeners and our viewers, some of you are wondering, what is Osha? OSHA is the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 2007. I'm sure many of you have walked into offices, buildings, and you've seen a big poster somewhere, a big poster that has been written occupational safety and something, and then it has a lot of it has a lot of guidelines, a lot of writings that are written in the fine print, and most of us are wondering, what's up with this thing? So, for anyone who has walked into an office or into whether private or public, especially banks and stuff, you will always see you'll always see that big poster that has issues to do with safety. And many of us, as I've just asked Linda, are wondering, okay, what is OSHA? What are the responsibilities? Zippy, what's your take on the employer's responsibilities on the same?
Thank you, Anthony, and thank you, Linda. I think just to add on to what Linda has said, employers have responsibility and so are employees as well. When we look at the OSHA Act of 2007, you will find on the first chapter, there are the duties and responsibilities that are actually outlined of what it is that employers need to do. And also employees, there's actually a chapter on employees' responsibility. So one of the things, and I think we touched a bit on this last week, one of the responsibilities is to make sure you're registered as a workplace. Now, you just mentioned that big document that I keep on wondering why is it so big and why can't it be made small and attractive? Initially, this used to be, done by factories. And I think most of our workplaces, it never used to be like a norm to kind of register as a workplace. But I think after 2007, when the act was brought in place, it became a requirement actually for employers, for any occupier to register their workplace with a ministry or with a director at the labor office.
Yes.
Now, most of the time, I think I've realized, and this again is from just interacting with different employers, we don't understand what is this all OSHA business and why we have to really register with it. But it's important for us to understand, actually, this is prescribed in the Act. That is your responsibility to make sure you register. When you look at the Act, it talks about occupier. Again, I think it's an element that tends to be misinterpreted. And a lot of times we think occupier means the landlord. And occupier is not the landlord. You, the occupier, is a person, you have rented these premises, you're using it for the purpose of business. You have employees there, you become the occupier. So you are liable to actually register. The other thing I would say is, like Linda has mentioned, is preparing a safety and health statement. A policy document that needs to be known is your responsibility. Of course, in the event you have situations at the workplace, like accidents, like you have a death, it's your responsibility to make sure you report. That's your responsibility as an employer. The other thing that I'm trying to remember is having health and safety committees. Okay, it's your responsibility to make sure health and safety committees are in place and they are working the way they're supposed to be working. Something like audits. Okay, again, a big challenge for most of us who don't understand what the OSHA Act is all about. You are required actually by law to make sure you do your audits and you remit them every 12 months. And again, it's very important for us to understand there are hefty fines that come with it when you don't comply. Sometimes we will say, I've been doing business for 10 years. I have not had all this. Why do I need to have all this? The truth is sometimes you're able to get away with it, but the law will catch up with you. And when it does, sometimes it can be an expensive affair. So I would say it's important for us to understand what the Act says about us as employers, so that, again, it's important for us to comply.
All right. That is pretty comprehensive from both of you, from Zippy and from Linda.
Okay, to add on that,
yes.
Yeah, I would like to add a point on that as what Madam Zippy has said. It should also be noted that the employer should ensure that no employee is discriminated against, especially in the virtue of is reporting a complaint of an unsafe work condition. Yes, so there should be no discrimination at all. Yeah, that is what an employer should ensure.
All right, awesome. Yes, I was about the next question, and I'm sure most people are wondering, okay, you're talking about safety in the workplace. I run an office. I don't run a factory. I'm not out there people using dangerous chemicals or electricity. I don't have huge machines. So the question, which probably, let me ask you, Linda. Then the question would be, to whom does this law apply? Does it apply to SMEs? Does it apply to factories or schools, for example? Are there entities that are exempt from these laws?
Thank you so much. I can say that the Osha, according to the Osha Act, most entities they must apply, especially when you register your workplace with the directory of Osha. You must comply to this law. The factories must definitely, because of the equipment there, the number of people who work in the factory, all of those ones must fall under this act and these laws so that they can feel protected. You see, SMEs, I can say from above like 10, less than 10 people. When it reaches 10 people, you must also comply. You must. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Linda. Zipporah, what can you add concerning application and exemptions to these laws?
I think Linda has put it very well, that as an employer, you are liable actually to apply and to apply for this certificate. And the Act again talks about applications and who can be exempt. Now, it's interesting that there are organizations that can be exempt, especially if you look at chapter 44 and 45. But again, the way this exemption has to happen, you have to apply for it. And again, there has to be some sort of a meeting, there has to be a gazette notice. You have to actually prove beyond reasonable doubt that you have put measures in place where there's no doubt about the health and safety of your employees. But again, this becomes a little bit of a challenge. Actually, I think it becomes more tedious than actually just doing the normal application and getting that certificate. Now, again, if you have to apply for this exemption, you have to be given an exemption certificate, which might not be a very easy way of approaching it. So I would encourage employers, if you're an employer, you have a building you have occupied as a workplace, it's easier to actually comply by making sure you apply for this certificate, which is not expensive, and ensuring that you're having the necessary documentation in place so that it doesn't become a bit of a challenge. So yes, I would say there might be some organizations that could be exempt, but this has to be applied. There has to be a meeting that has to happen. It has to be gazetted. You have to prove beyond, you have to really justify why you have to be exempted. And we all know that is always easy. So I would say it's easier to actually comply by just applying for the certificate.
Okay. So what that means then that whether you're a school, whether you're a hospital, I would assume a hospital, you cannot be exempt from such. If you're a factory, if you're a factory out there, whatever it is that you're manufacturing, if in whatever areas that you are in, as long as you're a workplace where people are hired and paid for their work, you've been registered with the local council, or sub-county, as long as you are registered, you're working you're hiring people are working for you, you have a license to operate, then it is imperative for you to have a workplace registration with the local council, with the Ministry of Labor. And then obviously with the local council, you have your license. So what we are saying here is that compliance of safety laws is mandatory for any employer who is out there. Now, which now brings me to the third question. The third question that I had in mind as I was preparing for this. Now, let's talk about DOSHI audits. Do these apply to all employers? DOSHI, by the way, Linda, probably you could answer this query by probably starting to tell us what DOSHI is, and then now what DOSHI audits mean, and then whether they apply to all employers.
Thank you so much. So the DOSHI is basically the occupational safety and health. And as I will refer back to what Madam Zipora had earlier said, that for any running organization, this DOSH must apply and an audit must be done. So for the DOSHI audits, an audit is very necessary because it guides us and shows us how you've been operating your organization. Are your employees safe? Even you as an employer, are you safe? You know, so basically, the DOSH audit is usually guided by the director of the occupational safety and health, and it has to be carried out at least once in every 12 months. And this one should be done by the safety and health advisor who is appointed by the director. Yeah, and so when he's carrying out the audit, he has to give a document to the occupier upon payment, and he has to get this document to the director to show that you have complied as an occupier, you have complied as an employer.
That is that is pretty comprehensive. Zippy, what's your view on the same?
Thank you, Anthony. I think Linda put it very clear, actually, that these audits are a requirement for every employer. You're supposed to do these audits every 12 months and make sure you make your returns. Now, to note is that failure to do that has also serious consequences, which includes fines of up to about 500,000 for not actually remitting this audit. So it's important for us to understand. I think the issue here is for us as employers to understand what are we required to do, and if we don't comply with this, then what are the consequences of it? So it's not enough to just register as a workplace. It's important for you to make sure you adhere to the laid down procedures, you adhere to, what is supposed to happen, like what we shared earlier in the beginning of the podcast, that you need to make sure you have a statement of health and safety that is understood. You have healthy committees. These committees are supposed to meet at least they're supposed to meet at least 3 times a year, if I'm not wrong. And they're supposed to actually make sure they submit their minutes to the DOSH director. Again, once you do these audits, make sure, again, they are done by a professional. Not everyone can do the audits. I can't do the audits. I might be an HR expert, but I'm not certified to do those audits. They have to be done by someone who's certified by DOSH. And again, once you do the audits, again, make sure they are filed with the director. If you don't do, then I think it also becomes a bit of a challenge for you to be able to renew your certificate for the next year. So it's important for us to understand what is the procedure, who is supposed to do what and at what point, so that it does not become an unnecessary cost to the business.
Okay. Now, somebody online has asked a very interesting question. This one, Zippy, I'll direct it to you. They've asked, what if I run an online-only business? Am I required to comply with Osha and with DOSH? What's your take? What's your quick take on that?
I think the law is always evolving, if you ask me, and I don't think currently the Act talks about online business. So if you are doing an online business, I think you might get away with it. I think when it comes to health and safety, we are more or less referring to brick and mortar, where you are having people coming to the workplace, where you are having people interacting. We are talking about health hazards. We are talking about occupational diseases. We are talking about all these things that would affect us simply because we are coming to a common area where we are working within. So I think if you are doing an online business, I think for now it's not an issue for you to worry. I think the challenge comes in now when you are actually having to run a physical office. Then at that point you have to comply. There's no question about it.
Thank you for that. Actually, I can see comments are coming in. Simon Kigutu, thank you for your compliments. That this is a very resourceful discussion. Keep sending your comments. Keep sending, if you have any question, keep sending them as we discuss. would appreciate to highlight them and even discuss them here. Now, let me ask you, ladies. This one I'll ask Linda. Now, let's assume what we prepare for, but what we hope it doesn't happen, that is, in the event of an accident in the workplace, an injury in the workplace, God forbid, even death in the workplace, what is my responsibility as an employer? Yes, Linda, probably you can give us a hint on the same.
Okay, thank you. In the event, this accident, that's why it's called an accident, because it can occur to anyone at any time. You may never know, especially when you're working in a factory setting, even when you're working as a driver, you see. So in case of an accident, the first thing an employer is required to do is make a statement and inform the area occupational safety and health officer. If it is a fatal accident, this report should be made within 24 hours. If it is a non-fatal, it should be made within 7 days. So and it should be in a written statement, especially if it is in case of a death occurrence. So the employer should write a statement and should have a backup from the hospitals, have all those correct documents, fill a DOSH form 1, take it to the occupational safety and health officer and let it be checked, signed, and recorded. Yes.
Okay. So there are timelines to report in case of an accident.
Yes.
There is a timeline to report. In case of injury, there is a timeline.
Yeah.
And God forbid, in case of death in the workplace, there is also a very strict timeline that ought to be met.
A very strict
Wow. Zippy, what's your take about this issue? Because I'm sure most of us were not aware that there are certain timelines that have to be followed very strictly in case of an accident or injury or death. Give us more about the responsibilities as an employer.
Thank you, Anthony. Let me talk about the responsibilities of the employer from a perspective of then how do you prevent some of these issues from occurring. I think more than reporting these issues, these accidents, these deaths that could happen, I think the first thing, if an accident happens at the workplace as an employer or as an HR professional, you need to do a root cause analysis and understand why did this happen in the first place. Is it because that we are a bit relaxed in following up our policies, or is it because we don't have adequate policies in place, or is it because people are careless, or is it because it was an accident that was unavoidable? So the first thing is to first do a root cause analysis and understand where is this coming from. Now, once you understand where this is coming from, then it gives you a framework to address the same. One of the things you can also do is look at your policies. Are they adequate enough to make sure they are helping us prevent some of these occurrences? For instance, if you're working or if your employees are working in a place where they are having to, let's say, pick items from, higher shelves. Look, for example, like supermarkets, for instance, and you're having employees who have to climb up there and put goods on top of shelves. What provisions have you put in place to make sure they're doing that in a safe manner? Because some of these accidents again happen because an employee is trying to get their work done, but they don't have enough tools or the necessary equipment to help them do that. The other thing is to look at, are your employees using PPEs? For example, they're supposed to be using the same. As an employer, have you provided these PPEs and have they been trained on how to use them? In the event these are not in place, and what are you going to do as an employer to ensure that they are in place and employees are trained? The other thing is training for employees. It's not enough for us to put the policies in place. It's not enough for us to register with the ministry to be compliant. You need to go a step further and also train your employees on safety and health at the workplace. In the event there's an accident, I mean, as an employer, you're not going to be on the floor every day trying to figure out what's going on. Some of these things are going to happen when you're not even near. Do employees know what to do in the event something like this happens? So I think it also comes down to us training our employees and for them to understand this is what we need to do in the event of an accident, and this is what we need to do to prevent some of these accidents. The other thing I would think on top of my head would be in the event you have an accident or an occurrence at the workplace. As an employer, do you have a mitigation measure where, for instance, you're able to call the medics immediately? You know, do you have first aid kits in place, and employees know where these first aid kits are? Because you have to remember, if someone has gotten injured, you have to take the necessary steps to ensure they're taken care of in the shortest time possible. So again, we need to look at what measures have we put in place to ensure some of these areas are covered. So I would look at it from an HR perspective. I would go back and see why did this happen and how can we prevent this from happening in the near future.
Okay, that is very comprehensive. To our listeners out there, remember, we are talking about compliance in the workplace today. And compliance is not really a hammer that we are using the government uses to extract more money from you, to look for a way to hinder, non-monetary barriers to prevent you from making your money. No, it is an issue of creating an optimum environment that enables employees to work safely, to work optimally, to have all the necessary requirements, and the many. I mean, we can talk about issues. For example, is your place well lit? Do you have what's it called? Yes, you have safety, fire extinguishers, for example. Is there adequate ventilation in your workplace? Are you taking care of things like floors, slippery floors, blah, blah, blah? Things like making sure that the electrical sockets are safe. They are not, the things are not dangling out there. Things, there could be outside where you're working, the materials they're using. If they're using hazardous materials, do they have the PPEs, personal protective equipment? If there is a construction in your building, and probably you're running, say, a school or a factory, and there is some mujengo there, are they using the proper scaffolding? I remember going to a school where they were doing some maintenance. They had hired people to do maintenance outside there, and they were using there's some of these kienyeji bows that are used as scaffolding as people go up the building. And one of the workers had fallen and broken his arm, and he had put a plaster. And the mdosi was like, ulipona, uko sawa sawa, endelea na kazi, mwanaume ni those are exposures that we don't think about. Those are things we don't talk about and think about, and they could put an employer in a potentially dangerous place. Now, to conclude this, Linda,
Yes,
your title is very risk. Is it insurance sounding?
Yes,
medical and WIBA officer.
Yes.
Now, tell me, from your perspective, where you work at, and these particular issues of medical and WIBA, could you probably, as you conclude, talk a bit about WIBA from a compliance perspective, why it is necessary for any employer to have WIBA for their staff?
Yes, thank you. WIBA basically is Work Injury Benefit Act, and an employer should ensure that everyone is covered under WIBA. That is the first thing he should ensure. So that in case of an accident, WIBA does not only protect the employee, it also protects the employer from certain liabilities. Because an employee can get injured and, let's say, has a permanent PTD, a permanent total disablement. Or when it comes to a payout, let's say it's 30% or 40%, you can't expect, like, if an employer is not well protected under WIBA, he himself to ensure that he's protected. If he's not protected by the WIBA, he will see himself paying out to that employee. But if he has an insurance cover that covers his company, so in case an employee gets injured and has a PTD, it goes back to the insurance company that pays the employee. Okay? And all these PTDs, they're calculated in the Occupational Safety and Health Department office. It has to be approved there. They have the final say. They have to do the last calculations there, because it's the percentage times the 96 months. Once you get injured. So once you have this, it might become a very big payout. You might see in terms of millions. So an employer should make sure that he is well covered under WIBA, and should also get a good insurance provider, an insurance provider who will not start bringing issues when it comes to do a payout. Yes, they should all be well coordinated, so that this, at the end of the day, it's the employee who has gotten injured. It is the employee who's going to suffer the consequences. They should make sure that the employee is well protected also, and if it is in time of a compensation, the employee is well compensated for the injury.
Thank you. So for our listeners and our viewers, WIBA is all about protecting the employee and the employer, making sure that in case there is an accident, that things like hospitalizations are in there, things like temporary total disablement. Probably, as I described that young man who had broken his arm, if he decided to pursue labor on such an issue, the Ministry of Labor, then if the employer has a form of WIBA, then he can probably make a claim. If, as a leader, you said, if it is a total disablement, you can't see again, or you've lost a part of your arm, or you've lost a finger, or you've lost whatever, then this is also taken care of. Now, we've had a wonderful session today. I can see our time is up for the podcast today. Zippy, what can you say as we close in regards to compliance in the workplace?
Thank you, Anthony. Just to actually just touch about WIBA, because you've asked that question, I think it's important for employers to understand WIBA is not something that you can decide to have or not to have. It's actually a statutory requirement. So actually that means you are bound by law to actually ensure you have WIBA in place. But again, I think now we are moving from just looking at WIBA as a basic requirement to thinking about what if your employee gets hurt while they have just left work, or they were on their way to work. And these are cases that I've witnessed. Someone gets injured and they say, I was on my way to work. I was like actually a few meters from the workplace. Okay, so where do we draw the line? And I think we have had insurance companies actually coming up with the WIBA Plus, which is a GPA that covers employees 24/7. And this is actually even a benefit that would motivate employees knowing, as an employer, I care about you as a person. We just conclude on this issue of compliance, because again, it's a very wide discussion and there are many areas of compliance. I think it's important for us to equip ourselves with the necessary knowledge, because when you have the knowledge, then you know what is supposed to be done, what you're expected to do, and it will not be a struggle. A lot of times, we don't have this knowledge because we are not seeking for it. This information is out there. Let's seek for this information. Let's seek out people who have the expertise, like Aurum consultants, who will be able to help you understand what it is that you need to do and comply, or what it is that you need to do, so that again your work environment becomes conducive. You have to remember, we have one goal when we are opening our businesses, is to make our businesses thrive. There is no way your business will thrive when it's not a conducive working environment. When people come to the work environment, you do, as an employer, you don't want the headache of being called and you're told that there was an accident and you have no idea what to do about it, and it lands you in trouble. So I think it's important, if we are going to expect our employees to perform at their optimum, for us to also ensure they feel safe at the work environment. That would be my
Wow. Thank you, ladies. Today has been a very productive discussion on compliance in the workplace. If you'd like to know more about this topic or any other topic that we've been discussing, you can get in touch with us via the email that you're seeing at the bottom of the screen, consult@aurumconsultants.co.ke. You can also get in touch with us through Facebook, through YouTube and LinkedIn. We are ready to receive your comments. You'd like us to assist you in one or two areas in regards to compliance. As Zippy has said, this is a wide topic. It has issues to do with HR, it has issues to do with insurance and other risk advisory issues. And therefore, we are there to collaborate with you. At the end of the day, you as an employer, you as a manager, you as an employee, you have a responsibility to take care of yourself while in the workplace. So with those few remarks, we appreciate you for logging in. We will be here same time, same place next weekend, and we hope that you'll be with us as we continue to discuss this issue of compliance. Thank you for logging in. God bless you. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.